Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening to Madam Rodzyah and my groupmate. So we are from group 11. Today our group would like to present a topic about terrorism. So before I start presenting about the topic of terrorism, so let me introduce myself. My name is Rodzyah Bt Md Zain. My metric number is 270374. Okay, we move on to the first point of today's presentation, which is definitions of terrorism. So what is terrorism and what can I understand about terrorism? So to define the meaning of terrorism is quite complex. Terrorism can be defined as the use of violence and threats to intimidate of forces, particularly for political functions. Besides that, some scholars say that the terrorism is the systematic use of terror, particularly as a ways of coercion. So in general, it can be said that the definitions of terrorism is the use of violence and cruel ways like bombings, murder and abductions to get political claims from a celebration. So that is the meaning of terrorism. Okay, we move on to the second point of this presentation, which is terrorism that happened in Malaysia. As we all know that Malaysia is one of the country where terrorism is taking place. It can be proved during the times of colonizations until the glory of Malaysia. So I started with during the times of colonization. The issues is Japanese invasion. The Japanese invasion was invaded on 8 September 1941, and this shown the terrorist attack since 1941 until 1945. So that is the issues of terrorism that happened in Malaysia during the times of colonization. So the second issues after Japanese invasion is the emergence of MCP and the MPAJA. MCP is Malayan Communist Party. Meanwhile, the MPAJA stand for Malayan Party Anti-Japanese Army. So the emergence of these two militant groups emerged during the Japanese invasion to fight against Japanese, and this two militant group was trained by the British military administrations to fight against Japanese. At last, the Japanese surrender on Malaya and replaced by the MCP and the MPAJA during that time. So that is the two issues that related to terrorism that happened in Malaysia. We move to the second issues that related to terrorism during the glory of Malaysia. So first one is the issues of Lahad Datu. As we know, the issues of Lahad Datu is the violence that can be attributed to the diplomatic relations between Malaysia and also Filipina. And this group had declared themselves as the Royal Security Forces of the Sulu and Borneo Sultanate that had been sent by Jamalul Kiram. According to Jamalul Kiram, their aim was to reclaim their territory in eastern, which was still unresolved. So that is the first issues during the glory of Malaysia. Next, it might be issues of militant Daesh, where this militant Daesh had happened around the world, where their main goal is to fight for the rights of Islam, but in fact that Islam is wrong in Islamic and wrong in law. Okay, that is the two issues that happened in Malaysia during the glory of Malaysia. We move on to the third point of presentation, which is factors of terrorism. There are various factors of terrorism that had been identified, but I have chosen 3 factors of terrorism. The first factors of terrorism is about the failure of world bodies such as United Nations and Organization Islamic Council, or well known as OIC. It can be proved that the United Nations until now failed to play a proactive role and even silent when United States oppress Muslim and invade the Islamic countries. Besides that, OIC also has since its fangs disappear in the face of problem facing its members. So that is the first factors of terrorism. Second factors of terrorism might be a country national peace is the main target of terrorism. It can be proved that Malaysia is one of the country national peace which often target by terrorist group to spread the terrorism. So that is the second factors of terrorism. The third factors of terrorism might be the frustrations of Islamic State and the anger of the Muslim community. According to our Prime Minister Malaysia in 2019, which is Tun Dr. Mahathir, he said that the main cause of worldwide terrorist attack because of the frustrations of the Islamic State and the anger of the Muslim community. And the terms of Islamophobia had followed the frustrations and anger of Muslims over Israel atrocities in Palestine. So that is the third factors of terrorism that had been identified. Establishments of terrorism community. Actually, establishments of terrorism community has 8 benefit. The first benefit is promote peace and security in every region. Second, it create a better future in our country. Third, it can speed up in terms of politics, economy and social aspects. So that is the benefits of establishments of terrorism community.
Assalamualaikum and good evening to Madam Rodzyah and my groupmates. Before I start my presentation, let me introduce myself first. My name is Rodzyah Bt Md Zain and my matric number is 270431. Firstly, I would like to story to you guys about 9/11 incident. On the 11th September 2001 began a horrifying and heartbreaking event that made transmitted Islamophobia among Westerners. This 9/11 incident has destroyed the World Trade Center buildings, or we call it as WTC. And the worst thing ever is the incident has claimed around 1,000 of innocent people life. The attack was carried out by terrorist group, or we call it as Al-Qaeda. This group actually from Afghanistan, and some of them from Mesir and Iraq. Because of that incident, the Prime Minister of United States that time, George W. Bush, has launched a campaign to fight against terrorists around the world. And because of that too, Muslims around the world have a great impact, as the campaign has labeled Islam and its follower as a terrorist and extremist. And besides that, America also enacting the United States Patriot Act, and until now, around 14,000 to 100,000 of American army have remained in Afghanistan. And besides that, many countries also adopted anti-terrorism legislation and increased law enforcement powers. For Malaysia, during the incident on 9 September 2001, the current Prime Minister of Malaysia was to Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Actually, he has different way of thought on that incident because he support and condemn United States. However, Dr. Mahathir agree and sign the agreement to follow and agree fight against the terror.
Okay, just now, Shahira had explained about the issues of 9/11 which had happened around the world. But now, I will explain the issues of terrorism that happened in Malaysia, which is issues of Lahadatu. Actually, these issues had give a big impact or big surprise to Malaysia because it involved foreign actors, which is a group of Filipino armed forces. As what I had mentioned earlier, on second point of terrorism that happened in Malaysia, their aim was to reclaim their territory in eastern Sabah is still unresolved. So that is the issues of Lahadatu that I can be explained and what I understand on the issues of Lahadatu. Reactions of Malaysia about terrorism through politics, economy and also social aspect. As we all know that the emergence of terrorism had bring a huge impact through politics, economy and social aspect. By through politics aspect, it can destroy the harmony of society. Besides, it also can bring down the government illegally. According to Sheikh Adi, the act of terrorism was to show their respective strength and set aside legal and security aspect. The political reactions that had been done by Malaysia is exercise a greater control over the border and also impose strict laws on terrorism. So that is the first reactions that had been done on Malaysia through politic aspect. According to Mat Sabu, in 2019 report, he said that the ministry is constantly monitoring the matter. Not only that, according to Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin in 2020, he said that Malaysia does not look down on the violence, whether domestic or foreign or others group trying to use Malaysia as a base of terrorism. So that is the reactions of Malaysia towards politic aspect.
Okay, next I would like to explain more about terrorism in aspect of economy. As we know, the movement of terrorism can cause loss of life and costly destruction of property. And this is because the method used by terrorism, such as kidnapping, hijacking, and bombing, can cause some damage and effect to the country. However, majority of people are questioning, does terrorism really distribute to the economic impact? Firstly, the possibility of terrorism can cause to the particularly damaging to trade or foreign trade investment (FDI). This is because investors more prefer to choose with less terror prone. And as a result, um, most of countries involved or having case in terrorism often had significant impact, especially for developing country. The main reason is the investor uh, need to put high risk for receive their investment. If they invest in country which is have terrorism issue. And next, the another impact is um, a country were threatened by terrorism will having physical damage. That's because usually terrorists target transportation system, workers, and other economic resources, where this damage going to burden the government and force the government to come up with a high budget to do the cleaning and recovery process for the public property. As example, the 9 September 2001 incident cost about $30 billion after the terrorist attack World Trade Center. And the another impact is international trade disruption. Problem arise due to the cost of doing business above nation border, which will increase. The possibility for the goods to damage is high. That makes the cheaper by the insurance to cover any damaging possibility in the part of terrorism production. For this pair, a good exported for one nation and imported by the others suffers potential risk in transportation in both nations. In my point of view, in the effect of terrorism have caused a great harm and burden to the countries involved, where such those are likely to affect the economy of country, and it will be difficult if the issue of terrorism continues and cannot be controlled by that country. For example, countries that struggle in the face of terrorism, such as Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan, continue to suffer economic problems, and the people live are affected by the country economic instability. We move to the terrorism policy in Malaysia. In Malaysia, we got several policies such as SOSMA, POTA, and SMATA. Firstly, I will explain about POTA. Because of terrorism movement, Malaysia has emerged a policy on how to counter terrorism to protect and defend from movement of terrorists. For example, Malaysia puts all concentration on terrorist threat, and in particular, it posed by the self-claimed Islamic State (IS). And because of the spreading of IS in Malaysia, the government has quickly enacted a law that deals with specifically with terrorism, which is our former Prime Minister Tun Datuk Sri Rodzyah Bt Md Zain was presented POTA in House of Representatives on 27 November 2014. Besides POTA, there is also a new law enacted to make sure several parallel amendments made to other existing laws to ensure that the law is comprehensive. Another law has enacted was special measures against terrorism in foreign country, SMATA 2015, were enacted to make sure the Director General of Immigration to suspend or revoke travel documents issued to Malaysian citizens who are involved in terrorist organization listed in foreign country or another part of foreign country. The next law has enacted was Security Offences Special Measure Act 2012, or known as well as SOSMA. It also seeks to expand the application of the acts, including inclusion of the Special Measures Against Foreign Terrorism Act to ensure that the law is sound and comprehensive, so there will no any subject to legal action. Actually, the action made by government by enact the law is used to curb the spread of terrorist movement and element which is can give threat to the country, and make sure that no one is immune from any legal action if they are involved in a terrorist movement. For example, on 2013, three people, namely Yazid Sufad, Halimah Hussein, and Muhammad Helmi Hasim, were the first people detained under SOSMA, according to the alleged incitement of Terrorist Act. And another case was the Haidatu standoff. 104 Filipinos were suspected because they linked to the Jamal Kiram, the person who claimed the throne of the Sultanate Sulu, also detained under SOSMA. So, in conclusion, with stringent laws and no compromise on terrorists, the issues of terrorism can be controlled very well, and about 60 people involved in militant movement known as Daesh in Malaysia until now, and some of these militant group and associations could be easily handled by the government, although Daesh is growing threat in the region, but their ability to move freely in Malaysia and the Southeast Asian region are limited. So next, I would like to explain or tell you guys about terrorism and Islamic country. Expressing opinions or thoughts on terrorism as well as Islamic countries is closely linked. This is said because most of the violence occurred against the Islamic State. This is evident in the Palestinian narratives of Israeli Zionist violence. This violence not only brings ruin and destruction in many respects, but also has a huge impact on the political, economic, and social life of the people. In connection with terrorism and even the Islamic State, we can see firsthand the events that occurs before our eyes, such as the issues of Israeli atrocities against the Palestinians, the issue of the U.S. violence against the Iraq, the violence that occurred in South Thailand, and other violence. Based on the issues above, we can understand, analyzing in depth, that the problem of violence is due to the religion factors. According to the 2019 Online Daily News report, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tun Dr. Mahathir, has explained that the main cause of violent attacks around the world is due to the frustration of the Islamic State and the anger of the Muslim with what was happening in Palestine, such as never producing result but only causing more innocent people to fall victim. Not only that, the term Islamophobia came out in the wake of Muslim frustration over violence or exterminations. Furthermore, as we know, there is no single religion that teaches its follower to do evil. Islam has never advocated terrorism. Instead, Islam is a peaceful religion, and the word often used by Muslim, Assalamualaikum, be a meaning peace open to you. The Islamophobia issues arise because of the action of some people who one show their angers and sign of protest, which is their religious totally distorted from the Islam belief, and because of their violence, Islam name has been tarnished, and Islam considered as a religion who enabling terrorism. According to the study from University Science Malaysia (USM), Al-Qaeda was originally set up to oust Russian army from Afghanistan on 1989. This organization was trained and supported by the United States. However, after Al-Qaeda successfully defeated the Russian army, they redirected their ideologies and tried to spread the ideologies and increase their followers around the world, especially in Islam country. And actually, jihad, according to Islam, means striving or fighting in the path of God, Subhanahu wa Taala, that leads to the peaceful. But the concept of jihad in Al-Qaeda or others terrorism groups is fighting against the some organization by using violence. Jihad by Al-Qaeda is a jihad based on terrorism, and such provide a dimension of understanding that goes against the concept of jihad in Islam. The ideology brought by Al-Qaeda has influenced a group in Indonesia known as Jihad Islamiyah, which is a group responsible for the bombings in Bali in 2002 and in Jakarta 2003. The 2002 incidents involved three explosions, one of bombings was targeted near United States consulate in Bali. So I want to share about my opinion on terrorism. Okay, firstly, terrorism is actually an act or movement that is too obsessed with a false belief that goes against the norm. Besides, in my opinion, violence occurs because a group of people act to seek revenge against their enemy. And another reason is a group of terrorists who exists is to expand their influence and increase their followers around the world by attacking or bringing their faith into a country with a strategic and potential country. The issue of terrorism has gained worldwide attention after the incident of 9/11. They claim to be a fighter for the cause of public interest, when in reality they are not. And some of terrorist groups have their own ideologies, which make them believe that their violence and act are lawful and necessary, and also acceptable by their God, which is fight for their religion interest. And I think the worst thing is some of terrorists use name of Islam in their fight. As a result, Islam has been tarnished in the eyes of the world. And for our information, and I think all of us know that every religion prompts its follower to do good. And for sure, Islam does not promote terrorism, and Islam is a religion of peace. So, in my opinion, issue of terrorism need to put as a priority and to be curbed and resolved immediately, because if it will continue to give if it will continues, for sure it will give negative impact, especially on relation between countries. Violence is not the best way to stop terrorism. Instead, by proactive negotiation, may I think as our former Prime Minister, Tun Mahathir bin Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, he said to stop terrorism by using violence or war is not the best way, because it will cause more damaging and counter strike. Such as in Middle East, such as Iraq and Iran, the issue of terrorism seems endless, because both of such using violence as a solution. But as a result, the citizens of the people in that country are suffered, and their lives are hard, and some of Indonesian people got killed.
That's all from us about the topic of terrorism. So thank you, madam.